I knew something was wrong the moment she stepped out from behind the barn, silent as a shadow, her hand raised like she was holding the whole world still. She looked me dead in the eyes and whispered, "Not a sound," and somehow, even though I was twice her age and had spent my whole life working these lands, something in her voice froze me in place. I'd never met her before, just a girl from a nearby Apache family that lived a few miles off my ranch. But the fear in her eyes wasn't the kind you ignore. And what she whispered next hit me harder than any punch I'd ever taken. I still keep asking myself if I reacted the right way after hearing it. So tell me, was I wrong for what I did next? Or would you have done the same thing? The whole mess started a few weeks before that moment, back when I was still trying to figure out how to run the ranch. On my own after my dad passed away. I was juggling debts, broken fencing, sick cattle, and a drought that kept turning my pastures to dust. My neighbors weren't exactly helpful either. I had one in particular, a rancher named Cole Ryman, who made it his personal mission to give me hell. He'd been feuding with my dad for years, always claiming we were grazing too close to his land or stealing his water, even though the creek that ran between our properties was shared by law. Dad always brushed him off, but after Dad was gone, Cole saw an opportunity. He started showing up unannounced, driving his truck too close to my gates, leaving tire marks near my fences, and spreading rumors in town that I was letting my place fall apart. I tried to ignore him. I had enough on my plate. But then weird things started happening, small at first, like tools going missing, cattle getting spooked at night, and the lock on my shed mysteriously broken. I didn't have proof it was him, but who else would it be? The man had been itching for a fight for a decade. I didn't have anyone helping me except my younger brother, who was only 16 and still in school, and an older ranch hand who came by once or twice, a week when he wasn't dealing with his own family stuff. And every single day, as I watched my pastures shrink and my cattle grow thinner, I felt the pressure building. One afternoon I was checking the far fence line, praying it hadn't been cut again, when I noticed someone watching me from the tree line. At first, I thought it was Cole, but then I realized the figure was too small. When she stepped out, I realized she couldn't have been more than 14 or 15. She kept her eyes low, almost like she was trying to work up the courage to speak. But before she said anything, she just nodded politely and turned back toward the woods. I didn't think much of it then. Folks from the Apache community nearby occasionally crossed through our land hunting or gathering firewood. Dad always said to treat them with respect and mind our own business, and I followed his advice. But after that day, I started spotting her more often. By the creek, near the ridge, once even by the barn. She never approached me directly. She just watched like she knew something I didn't. Then came the night everything changed. I'd heard cattle bawling and grabbed my flashlight, expecting coyotes. But when I got close, I saw tire tracks, fresh ones, cutting across my pasture. Someone had driven through on purpose. I followed the tracks until they disappeared into the dark. And I swear I felt something in me snap. I was tired of being pushed around. Tired of being blamed for things I didn't do. Tired of being alone in this mess. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I found my barn door cracked open. I walked in slowly, gripping my old wrench like a weapon, but everything looked normal. Until I turned around and saw her, the same girl, standing silently behind the haystack. That's when she stepped forward, lifted her hand, and said those 3 words, not a sound. She looked terrified, her eyes darting toward the open window like she expected someone to burst in at any second. Then she whispered something that chilled me more than any cold night ever had. "He's coming back," she said. "He was here last night. He said he'd ruin everything you have." I didn't understand how she knew that or why she was telling me, but the look on her face told me it wasn't a joke. She kept wringing her hands like she'd done something she wasn't supposed to. She went on, barely audible, telling me she had overheard Cole bragging to someone that he was going to teach me a lesson and make sure my ranch went under so he could buy the land cheap. She said she didn't want to get involved, but she knew what he was planning next, and she couldn't just watch it happen. I asked her why she came to me, why she didn't tell her family or anyone else. But she just shook her head and said she didn't want trouble. Her voice cracked every time she spoke, like she was scared of being caught just standing there. And suddenly everything made sense, the way she'd been watching me, the way she kept showing up near the ranch. She wasn't spying. She was making sure nothing bad happened. So that was the situation. I found myself in a teenage girl warning me that a grown man was targeting my ranch, my home, everything my dad had worked for. And I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to pause for a second and comment what you would have done if you were in my shoes. Would you confront the man? Call the sheriff, even if they never take sides in ranch disputes? Set up cameras? Wait for him to make the next move? Tell me what you think, because what I did next wasn't calm and it wasn't smart. But in that moment, my emotions took over. I told the girl to go back home and stay safe. And I promised her I wouldn't mention her name to anyone. After she slipped out the back of the barn, I jumped into my truck and drove straight toward Cole's property. I didn't have a weapon, just my fists and months' worth of frustration burning in my chest. When I pulled up, he was already outside, leaning against his fence, like he had been waiting for someone to show up. He smirked at me, and that alone nearly sent me over the edge. I yelled at him, asking why he was messing with my ranch, why he thought he could scare me off my own land. He laughed and said something about kids running ranches they can't handle. That was it. I lost it. We didn't get into a full-on fight, just shouting, shoving, both of us too angry to think straight. But the commotion brought out his wife, who stepped between us and threatened to call the sheriff. Honestly, I wish she had. It might have ended things sooner. Instead, Cole doubled down. He insisted he hadn't touched my property, called me paranoid, and said I was lucky he wasn't pressing charges for trespassing. I realized arguing wasn't going to get me anywhere, so I left, more furious than before. But something unexpected happened the next day. A deputy showed up at my gate, not because of the fight, but because someone from Cole's crew had anonymously reported that he'd been cutting fences and trespassing on my land. The deputy didn't say who made the report, but I knew. The girl must have told someone after all. And whether it was her family or someone else from her community, the sheriff's office finally had reason to look into the feud. Within a week, everything blew wide open. The deputy found evidence, tire tracks, cut wire, even boot prints that matched Cole's, that linked him to the damage on my land. They issued him a warning and told him if anything else happened, there'd be charges. After that, Cole backed off, completely. No more trespassing, no more intimidation, nothing. It was like someone had ripped the venom right out of him. I never saw the girl again after that. I went out to look for her once, wanting to thank her, but her family told me she was visiting relatives out of state. Maybe that was true. Maybe her family just didn't want her involved any further. Either way, she changed everything for me. Because of her courage, quiet as it was, I got to keep my ranch, my home, my dad's legacy, and Cole stayed far away after the investigation. Sometimes I still think about how scared she looked that day in the barn, whispering not a sound, like the truth she carried was heavier than anything she should have had to deal with at her age. And it makes me wonder how many problems get solved in this world by people who never get recognized for their bravery. So that's the story of how a girl I barely knew ended up saving my entire ranch. If you were on my side, like this video. If you want more stories like this, make sure you subscribe. And tell me your final thoughts in the comments. Did I handle the situation the right way? Or should I have done something differently? Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all in the next story.